Fox News alert: Colorado becoming a hotspot in the fight over Second Amendment rights today after a legislative committee approves a controversial bill that would make weapons manufacturers and sellers liable for crimes committed with their guns. Brand new hour here of America Live. Welcome, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. This legislation would become one of the most dramatic gun laws in the country and is polarizing the state. The lawmakers in Colorado believe they have the votes. Crowds of gun supporters rallied outside the State House yesterday, where victims of gun violence testified in hearing rooms that were packed with people. There were survivors of Columbine, relatives of Sandy Hook victims, and in high-profile testimony, astronaut Mark Kelly, whose husband, a former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, herself a victim of gun violence back in 2011. There were strong arguments on all sides.
I'm speaking out today because you have to be out of your mind to believe that someone with a plan to kill will not get their hands on a gun.
A background check is not a burden.
I'm telling you, this law is unenforceable.
I believe their Second Amendment is under assault.
Rights demand responsibility, and this right does not extend to criminals.
Wow. While Colorado is working on a number of new gun laws, this liability issue is getting a lot of attention. Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox News senior judicial analyst, and what they are trying to do is impose criminal liability or civil liability?
Civil liability.
For whom exactly?
For the manufacturer and the seller or the reseller if the gun is used to commit a crime.
So if I'm in a gun shop business, I got a gun shop and I sell somebody a gun and they go out and they use it and kill somebody, I could potentially get sued as the gun shop owner?
Yes, as could the manufacturer from whom you bought the gun. And if the person to whom you sold it sells it to another person, then the person to whom you sold it could be liable for the criminal behavior of the ultimate user. That's why you heard in one of the clips you just ran, police testifying at this hearing, this is unenforceable. You can't possibly impose a burden on D, the third person.
How far down the line can you go?
For what A did. I mean, think about it. Can we hold General Motors liable because an automobile kills someone, even if it's used recklessly, even if it's used criminally? Of course not. We just don't do that in America. This transference of liability is basically wrong and unfair.
Now, help me understand this, because back in 2005 or 2006, around there, we were starting to see, after they went after sort of big tobacco, and some plaintiffs' lawyers got big payouts from the tobacco industry.
They did.
Then they decided to try to go after the big guns and the manufacturers and say, let's sue gun manufacturers and we'll get a lot of money for, you know, gun violence. And the feds passed a law saying you can't do this, didn't they?
Correct. It's a federal statute enacted in 2005, signed by President George W. Bush, that specifically says the manufacturer and the seller, we're talking about a full-time dealer now, cannot be held liable for the criminal use by the end user of the product.
Why isn't that ballgame? How could Colorado get around that?
They can't. They can't. So I think that what Colorado is doing now is either woefully ignorant of federal law or is just making a political statement. Because if this legislation, which is going to go to the governor's desk, I think by the end of the week, if the governor signs it, I think it will be enjoined by a federal judge within minutes.
This piece of it, anyway.
Right, because it is in direct contradiction of the federal statute. And as your viewers know from watching your show, when the two clash, the federal statute prevails.
Yeah, that's what happened in Arizona, and it's happened elsewhere on other issues. But
Precisely.
I want to ask you this, and there are other items in the bill. They want 15-clip ammunitions. They want background checks, more extensive background checks, as you heard there, and some other items that are less controversial. But less controversial than this.
This is truly radical, this transference of liability.
Last night I'm sitting at home watching O'Reilly, and I see Jesse Waters. You know Jesse, right?
Right. Waters
World. So Bill sent him out to Colorado because while Colorado is focused on imposing liability on gun shop owners and gun manufacturers, the speaker, I think this is the Speaker of the House, I want to get his name, hold on one second, I'll get it, is out there trying to stop Jessica's law, trying to Mark Ferrandino. Okay, Mark Ferrandino. This is the guy who's stopping Jessica's law, which would tighten penalties for child molesters, from getting a real vote out by the lawmakers there. And Jesse Waters confronted him. Watch this.
You're not protecting the kids from sexual predators and passing Jessica's law. Why is that?
Well, no DAs. The DAs actually have opposed Jessica's law, so have victim rights groups.
44 other states have Jessica's law. 44 other states have Jessica's law. And you guys think you're smarter? Is that true?
No, I think we know what's in Colorado's best interest. I will go with the people of Colorado who are the ones in the trenches fighting this, prosecuting people who don't support Jessica's law and say we have tougher laws than Jessica's laws in Colorado. Thank you.
Okay, well, you're lucky O'Reilly wasn't here today, sir.
He probably is.
So at the same time, you got the Colorado House Speaker, Mark Ferrandino, a Democrat out there, trying to stop tighter penalties, greater penalties for child molesters. You got them pushing through legislation that's going to cut back on people's ability to have the gun of their choice, the weapon of their choice, the ammunition of their choice, and impose liability on gun manufacturers.
Right. I don't know what's in his brain or motivation, but it's a truism that frequently laws are written because people want to stay in power. So he must feel there's some political support for trying to transfer liability to gun owners. He must also feel, I don't know where, that there's some political support for not having a Jessica's law out there.
Which 44 states have.
Right, exactly. The bottom line with Colorado is this statute will be stopped by a federal judge. If it's not, it will make the ownership of guns so expensive that ordinary people who want to protect themselves won't be able to afford them. And that very act will be unconstitutional. The government can't burden your exercise of your freedoms, so the exercise becomes so costly that you're deterred from enjoying them.
If they pass this and it doesn't, and somehow it withstands constitutional muster, what gun manufacturer is going to want to sell guns in Colorado?
They'll all be black market sales, and that'll have the opposite effect from what Colorado wants.
All right, Judge. Well, it's always interesting. Thank you, sir.